Well, hello there and welcome to the 25th edition of the About Small Business podcast. This edition marks the end of the first series. If you've got a small business and you want to be featured on the podcast, please do get in touch, reach out via the Facebook page, via email, via the website, or indeed via the YouTube channel. Let me know you want to be included. There are more podcasts coming up, so if you are enjoying what we're doing, please do hit the like and subscribe button, and also the little notification bell that lets you know every time a new episode drops. Well, in this edition, I'm actually talking to Owen Weightman from 3D Virtual Spaces. We're going all techie for this episode. Owen, thank you so much for coming on the podcast.
It's a pleasure, Barry.
And can you tell me a little bit about what you do, 3D Virtual Spaces? It sounds really quite amazing. It sounds very futuristic.
It's basically what I do is go into buildings and businesses and create a 3D digital virtual model of that business so that people can go online and look around and interact with the business. And it sounds a bit space age, it's not. And I think we'll talk more about what it's used for throughout the podcast.
I was just going to say, what kind of business would use that?
Pretty much any business, to be honest. So I'll give you a scenario. Let's say you own a restaurant and you want people to come into your restaurant and eat some food.
Yeah.
Right. So what they can do is look online, virtually move around your restaurant, interact, look at the menus. So you can use it as kind of a sales thing. Because if you've got two restaurants, you've got one next to each other, you look in the first one and there's no imagery, there's nothing. And
right.
You walk around in the second one and you like it, you'll go to the second one every time. Right. But it goes beyond that. It goes into, for example, accessibility. Because if you were in a wheelchair or you had limited mobility, you can actually move around inside and determine whether it's the right space for you. You can measure up to see if your chair fits through a gap or whatever it is. And if you don't like it from an accessibility point of view, then you can contact the venue and ask them to special arrangements or whatever it may be. And also, it could act as a familiarization tool. So if you were neurodivergent, autism's the key prime example.
Yeah.
If you were autistic and you wanted to visit the space, you can actually look around virtually in advance, become familiarized with it. So when you get there, you're less anxious about visiting. So in that case, it's kind of multi-purpose.
Right. So lots of obviously opportunities for you. So in terms of how you chanced upon this, what's your background in terms of?
It's not related to my background. If I step back into, it's going to be a long podcast if I start talking about that. If I step back in time, 5 years ago was roughly when I started this company. And before that, as I tell everybody, I had a real job. And the real job was based...
Let's go back to your real jobs.
Right.
So from leaving school, let's have a quick CV from Owen.
Right. So in the beginning, left school at 16, did an apprenticeship, engineering apprenticeship, electromechanical at Black & Decker at Thinford,
right.
Local. I always promote apprenticeships when I'm talking in situations like this because I think they're such a valuable asset.
Yeah.
And everybody's going down the degree route and spending loads of money on universities. Don't go and, if you're not that minded, go and do an apprenticeship.
I think there's a lot of money to justify and spend these days.
Yeah. And you're coming out, you're earning on the way through it. You're coming out with similar qualifications, possibly the same qualification, and you're getting all of that experience in the meantime.
Yeah.
And you're pretty much guaranteed to get a job. If you're any decent employee at the time. So apprenticeship, worked at Black & Decker for a couple of years, and then I moved. There was a big company called Fujitsu.
Yes.
In the news, different branch, I'd like to say. And they set up in Newton Aycliffe manufacturing semiconductors. So they were actually doing memory chips for computers. So I got a kind of initial place with them. It was in the first setup of the greenfield site. And because the factory wasn't built, I did stuff like went to Japan for 6 months. It was a really good time. I was 22 years old with a group of 30 lads and went to Japan and just karaoke my life away.
Somewhere I've always quite liked to visit Japan. So one day.
Since then, I've been back probably 25 or 30 times.
Right.
Through business stuff.
Yeah.
So job at Fujitsu, became a maintenance engineer, basically. And then I got the opportunity to go and live in Germany for a couple of years with one of the supplier companies for Fujitsu. So I did that and got into sort of sales / maintenance of equipment. So the company would manufacture machines in Japan, ship them across to customers like Fujitsu, but also like Intel and
Yeah.
ST Microelectronics, all of the big manufacturers. We would install and maintain them. So it's kind of a sales organization and then an installation and maintenance organization all in one. Worked there for 25 years and got to the point where I was director of service, and it was, the job itself on paper looked fantastic, lovely salary, all that kind of stuff. But it was loads of traveling. It was, relatively pressurized meetings.
Yeah.
The stuff that
It sounds it. I mean, if you're traveling to Japan, I think initially there's a novelty there, but obviously it is obviously time that is taken away.
Yeah, my direct areas were Europe and Israel.
Right.
So, I'm kind of pleased I jumped out at the moment.
So I mean, the traveling, you're clearly traveling quite a lot. Is that something? Is that an aspect of the job you enjoyed?
No. It got to the point where you're sitting at home drinking a cup of tea or a glass of wine on a Sunday night, and you've got to get up for a flight at 3:30 in the morning, and it just destroys your whole afternoon because you've got that kind of cloud hanging over you.
And it's not for a holiday.
And it's not for a holiday, and you're going away from your family, and it's just, to me it was a really aggravating situation that I was working in. And I'd done all of the stuff, like put my kids through school, put my kids through university, paid me house off, all that kind of stuff. And I got to that point, and I woke up one morning and thought, I don't have to do this. I don't have to continue in this lifestyle. I can do something else.
Right.
So I said to my wife, Sarah, I think I'm going to hand my notice in. And she looked a bit shocked. And I said, I don't know what I'm going to do.
Yeah.
But I don't have to do this. I quite fancied a portfolio career where you do a bit like yourself, where you do several different things in moderation.
Yeah.
And kind of then you've got that flexibility and the interest in life as you go through. So I quite fancied that. So after a couple of days of thinking, the notice went in. The fact the company themselves were a bit shocked because there was no real reason for it, and they were like, "Have you got cancer? Are you all this kind of stuff?" I was like, "No." I said, "It's that life-changing experience where somebody's in a really nasty car crash and they just survive, and they think, I've got to reevaluate my life. I did that without the car crash."
Which is fortunate.
Well, yes, in that respect, yes.
So I mean, almost do you see this like as retirement in a way? Semi-retirement, yeah.
I don't think I'm ready for retirement. But
No.
semi-retirement.
I think retirement's it's a curious term in this day and age, because I feel a lot of people are sort of sharing those feelings that you're saying that you felt.
Yeah.
It's that thing of you're doing what society expects of you. Yeah. You're doing what in many ways you're kind of obliged to do to put food on the table, and like sort of just pay your way. But there does come a point, and I think for everyone, where they're looking at just something that's that little bit more stimulating, fulfillment. Yeah. Some people may, if you're lucky and you get the right job and it takes you through the right opportunities, but I think fundamentally that's not in your control. And I think that's certainly for a lot of us that end up self-employed, as we both are, it's that control of your life. And whilst you were getting up at whatever time to fly to Japan, Germany or Israel, that's not it's not your choice, is it?
No, it was to an extent, it was my choice, but I had to do it at some point, and it kind of went, if I had a cancelled flight or, once my car broke down on the way to the airport, it was kind of a relief because I thought I can just go home then. I shouldn't say that because somebody from the company might watch. No, but yeah, so I think in my case, it was such a weight off my shoulders. I had 6 months notice to play with, and it was such a weight off my shoulders that I didn't care what was going to happen at the end of that 6 months, but it was just such a nice period during that time because I knew the end was in sight.
Was that something you had to do? In looking back, was it something you absolutely had to do?
I didn't have to do it, but I wouldn't have enjoyed life anywhere near as much if I hadn't done it. And I think what you said before, it's a really interesting thing that since COVID and working at home and all the other things, I think generally, I don't want to say people have got lazy, but people realise that the 9 to 5 on the treadmill kind of working ethic isn't necessarily there anymore. I think things have become different since COVID.
That is interesting, because I think there's within certain professions there's the work ethic is a strange one. It's like sort of there's a real all or nothing.
Yeah.
There's sort of that expectation if you and you know, if you are lucky enough to have a job, to be working in a well-paid job, people really are expecting an awful lot from that. You know, and they're expecting and I think as well. I mean, my profession was teaching, and it used to be that you got a job for life. Whereas now that's not the case anymore.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of, you know, like the NHS,
because 40,000 left the profession last year.
Well, I mean, this is it. This is it. We've got a number of these jobs that used to be, oh, you've got a job for life, and all of a sudden it's like, well, actually, no, your job's very much dependent on your performance, as it should be.
Yeah.
Let's be blunt. I mean, you've got a job, but you do come to a point where it's like, right, well, if I'm putting all this effort in, it would be nice if I had that control and that say, I think. And that seems to be what you're saying, that you thought that would be nice for you to have that.
What's nice is not to have the travel in. So when I'll just step back a little bit now. 6 months notice, decided what I was going to do. It came to the point where I knew that my lifestyle would change for the better. I knew that without any doubt whatsoever. I didn't know if I'd have any money. I didn't know if I could make any money, but I knew that I could do something. I could go and stack shelves in Tesco's or whatever it may be, you know, and still earn some money. My wife still has a job. She's a teacher.
Right.
Teaching, actually. So I'll tell you about that after this, because she's got an interesting job as well. And so during that period, I set 3 targets. Let's say goals, for want of a better word. And that was healthier, happier, and helpfuller. No, helpful is not a word. It just goes in.
That works. It's your business. You do what you want.
So the helpful. Well, this is life rather than business. The helpful. The happier was the Sunday night thing where I'm miserable to my wife and family. You know, and I wanted to change that. I didn't want to be a miserable grouch through the weekends when that's my precious time at home. You know, I wanted to be happier in life and not have that kind of dark cloud of Monday mornings to look forward to. And to make people around me happier as well.
Yeah, I think a lot of people can relate to that.
Yeah. The healthier, I used to, let's say, probably 5 to 10 years before I left, I was doing like Ironman triathlons and ultra marathons and all that.
Wow.
Like proper, not fast, you know.
I think doing them at all, that's an achievement.
Well, when you're 40 plus, you don't want to go that fast, really, to be honest. So I was doing that kind of stuff, and I just didn't have time at the end of my career, let's call it. I didn't have time to do that anymore. So I wanted to get back into exercise and become more healthy, so you can live longer. Ultimately, lose a bit of weight, whatever it may be. And the helpfuller was I wanted to do something that was going to be more helpful in society. I wanted to generally try and help people. Help businesses, whatever it may be, but I didn't want to just go into business meeting after business meeting and argue about how much the service cost or how much an installation would be or why we don't have enough manpower on site and all that kind of stuff, which is what I was doing before. For me, I was just, sitting there working for a company, earning money for the company, but it didn't really help people. There were aspects, obviously, where you can help people, not on an individual basis, but overall the job didn't kind of point in that direction. So they were the 3 things. So I looked at various things through that 6-month period and I said, right, that technology, which I'm using at the moment, is something that is probably not well known, but looks very useful in the northeast of England.
Yeah.
And that ultimately, most people will have seen similar stuff. Ultimately, it could be used for selling houses.
Yeah.
Right. So you look on your estate agent's website and you can walk around digitally in the house and see where the sink is and see where the bedrooms are, that kind of stuff. And I thought there must be more than that. That's such a fantastic tool because you get this lovely 3D model and you get all sorts of bells and whistles with it, and you can get overlays to put menus in and all sorts of things when I looked into it. So from that point, I talked to a few people, just showing them what it was and, how it worked and stuff like that. And I've got a good friend called Martin Wilson, and he owns an inclusive dance group.
Right.
And they have a lot of autistic dancers. And he said to me, that would be really useful for my dancers to see venues and hotels ahead of time before they travelled so that they could come familiarised with them so they were less anxious when they were there, which is what I explained before. So he kind of triggered a spark in that. So he got a bit of funding.
Yeah.
I bought the equipment on my nice old salary. And, we went on from there, really. So from that point, it's not always accessibility and familiarization and inclusion stuff that I'm doing, but it's a big part of it. And I feel that that's how I'm kind of being helpful in society.
That's an interesting take, because certainly, having seen your business card, I did check out your website obviously before we met, and that's not kind of as I wasn't expecting that. It's as you say, I think most people kind of expect the estate agency thing because that's
Yeah.
what
Well,
occurs to most people, but
Barry,
obviously
you've hit the nail on the head, because I did that website when I first set the business up. It does need a refresh.
I think everyone's website's like that, though, isn't it? It's like
Yeah.
I think which isn't interesting as a side part with the social media. That's where people are channeling their efforts out there, and and you do forget about the website, which is, potentially a great tool for
Yeah.
letting people know what you do, and something that obviously everyone does need. So it's in terms of the 3D modeling, does that in any way relate to your previous job? No, not at all.
No, and I'm basically saying to people out there all the time, especially young kids, that if you've got any experience or any knowledge, you can go into a shop and buy some stuff and create a business with it.
Yeah.
You don't necessarily have to have 20 years experience. So the technology is in such a state these days that you can generally get something that will do a job. Maybe not, if you're a coder and you can write really fancy code or create apps or whatever it may be, you can generally get something that does a portion of that just off the shelf, use artificial intelligence, whatever it may be.
I was going to say, it's like quite scary when you look at just ChatGPT is obviously the one that everyone's heard of, and certainly the one I've used the most. And I've used it, obviously my background is like as an English teacher, and I've looked at its language capabilities. But then when you realise actually this thing can produce code as well.
Yeah.
And that's when it's like, wow.
Yeah.
Because you kind of have to know what you want to pull out of it. So you still need that degree of expertise. And, someone like yourself would use it very differently to the way I might use it. But that's great because it's still there as an amazing resource. But yeah, I think you're right about the time. And I think, a lot of people will be familiar with the Richard Dawkins 10,000 hours to become an expert.
Yeah.
I've heard of a broadly similar one that says, I think 20 hours is what's required to become competent. Which does appear to make it like sort of 20 dedicated hours, not like sort of sat around.
And that's not just in a work aspect, that's it, sport and everything else, I think.
Yeah.
You get to that level where you can start to become an expert.
Yeah, absolutely. And then once you kind of start living it, you then you get quicker.
Yeah.
And I think that's the thing. There's no great, these people that have been doing something for 20 years. And again, it's like, it depends on what you've been doing for that time. You've maybe got, sort of 1 year's experience, but times 20, which isn't the same as doing all those different things.
I think one of the points that I've noticed is that I don't have any experience or knowledge of what I'm doing now, apart from the last 5 years when I've done it. But I did do research.
Yeah.
So I've looked, I've YouTubed myself to death. I've gone on Facebook pages and all sorts of stuff. I'm an administrator for one of the Facebook pages for the company, and there's like, I can't remember, 20,000 people on there or whatever it is.
Wow.
And they're always coming with questions and they're always coming with answers. And if you just study that and you learn how to do things and you pick little clippets of information, it's really useful. But what I did find was, outside the technical stuff that I'm doing, the advantage, I think, that what I had over the working career was, maybe I'm going to call it professionalism. The experience of working in that business environment makes me look much more professional. So I've worked, for example, with, I don't know if you're familiar with CPI. So I go into the CPI sites and I scan their production areas. So this is another user case. I scan their production areas, which can be either dangerous places or very busy places. And they use those scans potentially to show their customers and clients around the site without any danger and, without interfering with any production and that kind of stuff. They could do it to a potential customer in India or Japan or wherever it may be.
I suppose you're seeing opportunities for the business, aren't you, because of your experience?
But I got that business because my background was in semiconductors and they had a semiconductor manufacturing area, and I knew how everything worked and what not to touch and, all the safety stuff like that. So that was a really positive impact for me that I'm using my experience from my last job in this job, but not on a technical level.
I think that's crucial to like any business, isn't it? Just making, and whatever experience you've got, and as you say, everyone's got something, and it's just how you package that up and repurpose it.
And have that seed of an idea that's different to other people. You know, I think if you want to be, I don't know, no offense to anybody here, if you want to be a window cleaner, then you buy your, well, you can't even buy ladders anymore, can you? Because you're not allowed to use ladders.
No, I remember
you buy your stuff.
Yeah,
and you go be a window cleaner.
It's quite an expensive machine now. You've got to have it, old sort of jetting, which
it's a really bad example, wasn't it? You know, you get the idea.
Window cleaners of yesteryear, and I don't know
let's
what you
step
mean.
back 10 years. You buy your ladder, you buy a bucket and a mop and a sponge, and you go and clean windows, and that's fine. But you're in competition with everybody else who's cleaning windows, so you need an edge. You need an idea to do something differently.
Yeah.
So
I think that's it. You've got that sort of a curve of your barrier to entry versus competition.
Yeah.
So if you invest a little bit more in something that not everyone's got, then you're in that position.
Yeah.
But nothing to stop you throwing in and approaching a business the old-fashioned window cleaner way.
Oh, absolutely.
So
absolutely.
What's interesting is I kind of expected, because you do come across as professional, you do come across as someone that's does have business experience. I was expecting that you had perhaps had some connection to what you're doing now in your previous job, and perhaps had picked up a number of clients that way. Now, in some ways, you've managed to do that through being very creative with your experience, but that's not how you've built your business, is it?
It's not how I've built the business, but I mean, the CPI one, I did have some connections with CPI. That's the only one in the fact that I knew some people that they knew.
Yeah.
And that was it. That was as far as it went. But because I had the experience, then that got me kind of through the door. But at the minute, I'm absolutely privileged. So, for example, last week I was in Durham Cathedral.
Yeah.
Creating. So another user case. I'll keep coming up with these as we go through. It's going to be a 2-hour podcast. Durham Cathedral, in the rose window end of the cathedral, it's inaccessible. They've got steps. So if you're in a wheelchair, unless somebody's going to carry a wheelchair down, then you can't get down. And then they've got in St Cuthbert's shrine, they've got steps up again. So that end of the cathedral is inaccessible to a lot of people. So they wanted some way to make it inclusive. So I can create a digital version of that end of the cathedral so that the people who can't access it can have a virtual version of it.
Right.
So imagine you're sitting at your PC at home, or you're sitting at a pad in the cathedral, or whatever it may be. You can kind of click your way around, walk around, press on a tag, and it'll tell you information about that particular statue or that area. And you kind of gain the knowledge. You look around 360, you gain the knowledge from that virtual version rather than actually physically visiting. Which makes it inclusive. And it means if you're lying in a hospital bed in Australia or whatever, and you can't afford to come, or whatever it is, anybody can kind of just look online, as long as you can borrow an iPad and you've got some internet connection.
Why this?
That helpfuler thing.
Yeah.
I really saw a niche. At the minute, I'm extreme. I'll say it all the time. I feel like I'm blessed with the work that I'm doing and the job that I've got and the flexibility that I've got.
How did you become aware of it, though?
Looking around.
Was it just kind of random inspiration that you saw something?
It was because I saw the equipment. And I thought that it was like a spark. It was like, that looks useful, And then you look into the pricing and all that, because I've got monthly costs, but not a lot. I work from home. There's only me in the company. I vowed that when I left my last job that I will never have anybody working for me, and I will never work for anybody again. So it's so that my overheads are relatively low. I don't have premises. I don't have employees.
Yeah.
And my monthly costs, I do have them, but they're not huge, which gives me, again, more flexibility, because I don't have to price jobs out of the market. So, for example, I was contacted by Durham County. I approached Durham County Council for a museum space. I work in places like Bowes Museum, so I've got a lot of portfolio stuff behind me. But this was a little council-run exhibition space in Bishop Auckland Marketplace, I live near Bishop Auckland, so it's very convenient for me. And they wanted to keep a record of the exhibitions. So the exhibitions come in for a month or 2 months or whatever it may be. So now we're historically building up records of those exhibitions, so that if people want to go back 9 months, they can still visit the exhibition, because there's a lot of local history in there, and there's a lot of local artists who present put stuff in there.
Which is quite incredible, isn't it? That you've then got
Yeah,
that,
you've got the exhibition.
yeah, that you can kind of move around. In terms of what you're doing, will that, because obviously we've got the I've forgotten what it's called, the new Apple virtual reality device. Yeah. Will this all connect in with what you do?
It's my stuff is virtual reality, and that's augmented reality.
Yeah.
So the idea of Apple, I mean, it's price inhibitive, first of all, because you get thousands of dollars for a headset, and not many people are going to do that to look around Devon County Council exhibition. I would imagine it would work, but
yours just operates on a standard browser, though, doesn't it?
It operates on anything. One of the nice things about the whole technology is that you can use any device. So you can use a mobile phone, you can use an iPad, you can use a PC, you can use a Mac, whatever it is. Yeah. You don't need any special software. You don't need anything to view the stuff, just a browser. Yeah. But you can also use a VR headset, so VR rather than augmented reality, and then look around. And it's a little bit jerky, but if I put it on you now, you know that you're not there, but there's something in your mind that says, actually, I think, I might be there, and you kind of lose yourself because you're looking around these. You're
still getting
obviously
the
you're not walking around.
Yeah,
you could sit in a chair and you just kind of clicking your way around again, but you do get that feeling that this is quite impressive. It's good.
No, so I mean, you mentioned 5 years. So did you start this just before lockdown then?
Yeah, 2019.
So, did lockdown, were you kind of one of the winners, I suppose, from lockdown in that respect? Did that help you?
Things became virtual through COVID, which was good. People started to get it, especially so Bose Museum. So I was in one of the university kind of network and technology groups. I won't go into details, but there's 5 Northeastern universities. We're joined together and they run things for small businesses. Yeah. So I use that sort of stuff like networking. I know I'm going to meet people who may be useful for my business, and I'm interested in talking to them and hearing their stories as well. Yeah. So it's really great for me. I love networking. It's the only way I market my business, really. And I was in this little group, and there was a lady there who was looking after one specific picture in Bose Museum. That was her job. She's, they must have got some funding, and it's a very important picture, and I won't go into details, but they'd had a school project in Bose Museum. Right. And local artists were coming in, local school kids were coming in and creating representations of this particular piece of art, and they wanted to exhibit these pieces of art in Bose Museum, which they did, but then lockdown came. So the museum was closed. So I used that kind of inclusion thing and said, look, I want to help you. Let me create a virtual version, and then you can have your opening day virtually on Zoom or whatever it is, and everybody can look around. You can just send the link out to 100 or 1,000 people or whatever it is. And they can all look around together with the information tags and with all the other stuff. So we did that. And since then, Bose Museum, I think, realised some of the benefits of the virtual stuff. Yeah.
It does seem to me that there are an awful lot of the benefits there for that type of establishment. Because I was kind of, as I mentioned, I was expecting that we'll be talking a lot more technical, but you're actually very much involved within the arts, aren't you? Really?
Right. Yeah. Which is great because
in terms of the helpfuler.
Yeah. Without being offensive, the arts is a really nice place to work because the people are really nice.
Yeah.
I do my engineering stuff, and that's nice and supportive, but you can tell that there's that professional edge, whereas in the arts, people are just nice and helpful, and it's great for me because I can go into, I'll use Bose Museum as an example, I can go into Bose Museum and they'll take a lot of the signage down and the barriers down, and I go in and do my stuff, but I'm basically there by myself looking around beautiful exhibitions. Yeah. It's a real joy.
Yeah,
sometimes.
That's it. And I think that's, it just, that passion for what you do.
Yeah.
And the enjoyment, and I think sort of the fulfilment that was perhaps lacking from your successful corporate position.
Yeah. At the minute, I've been blessed again. So I fell in line. I met one of the managers from Newcastle Gateshead Initiative, NGI, a couple of years ago. And kind of showed him my stuff because they're involved in all of the sort of hotel and tourism industry in Newcastle and Gateshead. Now there's an initiative which has put 3 regions together. So there's Newcastle Gateshead, Visit County Durham, and Visit Northumberland as a single tourist destination. Right, and this is an advert for the North East and how forward thinking, in my opinion, the North East is. They got some government funding So they've got a Destination Northeast, it's
Yeah.
called, if anybody wants to look that up. They got some government funding to create inclusion and accessibility models, aids, whatever you
Yeah.
want to call it. And I, very fortunately, through that initial meeting, got the funding. So I'm now going around 30 locations in the Northeast as part of this funding, creating inclusion and accessibility models, which is really great for me, but it shows how forward-thinking NGI,
Yeah.
Visit County Durham and Visit Northumberland are, because they're being able to now show anybody with access needs or anybody who needs familiarisation these models before they actually visit. So they can. The prime example for accessibility for me is, so for example, Sunderland Fire Station,
Right.
the theatre at Sunderland Fire Station. So I created a model of the pub and the theatre, and what it means is if you're in a wheelchair, you can, I'm using wheelchair, I know there's only 7% disabled people in wheelchairs. You can basically realise your route from the entrance, in fact from the car park,
Yeah.
the accessible car park space. You can realise your route through the building, where to get your ticket from, how you get to the accessible lift, what your view is going to look like from your seat, everything from that. So you can plan you to the last detail. You can plan your visit without asking any awkward questions.
It's interesting because there's so many things like that you, as an able-bodied person, you would take for granted and you wouldn't even think of.
But that's not specifically true, because a lot of people, when I show a lot of people some of the stuff that I'm doing, so I'll use Sunderland Fire Station as an example. If you've never visited, a lot of people are still nervous about going to a new place because they don't understand it.
Yeah.
And they want to know where the toilets are, and they want to know where you get your tickets, for example.
Yeah.
And a lot of people, you're probably fine. You'd work your way through it, but some people are really nervous about that kind of thing.
Yeah. And this is all where obviously your business can help.
Yeah. Yeah.
Fantastic. So in terms of things seem to be sort of working out well for you. You've managed to, let's say, through your networking, you've worked out what works for you in terms of getting your business in, picking up contracts. It sounds to me like, as well, I think what's interesting is I like the way that you've got this sort of repeat business for exhibitions and things like that. I think that's a cracking way, because I mean, again, often you might look at a business like this and it'd be quite easy to, all right, well, once you've done one, you've done it. Do you really need one again? But you've managed to like sort of...
The other point about that is, because I have cloud hosting costs, everything's hosted in the cloud that I do, all of these 3D models, and I have costs, but I put an annual hosting fee on that, but included in, so it's a very small fee. It's normally about 60 quid a year for a model, so it's £5 a month. But if you look at the fire station in Sunderland, it's a big building and you get a lot of value for money. But what I do then is make small changes within that cost. So if they say, oh, we've moved, we don't sell that beer anymore, then I can kind of edit it, or I can change some text or something like that. So they do get kind of value for money, but it covers my hosting costs. So if I come to the point in 3 or 4 years and retire, I can still just continue with that business ticking over in the background with the hosting costs, and not take these models away from everybody, or not, I don't have to close down. I can just keep it running.
So basically, people have got that reassurance that as long as the hosting's covered,
as long as the company itself that I use, it keeps going. That's one of my fears. But there are alternatives.
I suspect, like anything though, there's the company that you use, there'll be backups, or there'll be someone that would buy that space.
We envisage that.
Yeah. I think, to be fair though, that's going to be the same for anything.
What I can do is, so an example. So I do travel around from time to time. So I had a job in London. It was called the Cloth Workers Livery. And basically, Livery is a big organisation set up mainly in London to control the quality of a particular item. So you've got gold, you've got, I don't know.
Yeah.
In this case, it was cloth workers. So historically, from 16th, 17th century, they have had a building in the centre of London, and they used to guarantee the quality of cloths that people were making. So they would kind of give an accreditation to the cloth makers, and that was the main kind of headquarters for that. So they've had various buildings over the years, and they've got this beautiful building right in the middle of London in the financial quarter, and they were going to knock it down. So they were going to build a new building for them, but also build a skyscraper. They've got a lot of properties in London that they let out, and it's a charity, and they give a lot of money to charity, millions to charity every year. But they were going to build a new building, so they wanted a digital representation of the old building, same as the museum thing. So I went and created that. But on the back of that, there was a lot of information in that model that a lot of the contractors could use.
Yeah.
So they could remotely see all of that. Lost my track now. I don't know what I was going to say then. But that created something special for them. With that, in their case, what I did was provided the digital information to create that 3D model. So I can actually extract that and put it into a different format. So we've got that on file. And I sent it to them, and it was a massive file. So I sent it on a memory stick. But what they can do with that, if the company goes down and that digital version in the cloud no longer exists, they can build something similar from the information that I've given to them.
Right.
Through
Okay.
a different organisation.
So I mean, in terms of backups, I suppose the work that you've done, you're storing it in the cloud. Would they be able to like sort of just keep a local copy? Is that?
You can keep a local copy, but it's for your own personal use. It would be on an iPad, for example.
Right.
You can't then put that onto a server for everybody to see. The company that does the cloud stuff is very particular about what they hold on to and what they allow people to do. But you can take that digital information out and you could put it into some kind of 3D builder, if you like, and create something again that then you can put your VR headset on and all the same kind of stuff.
That's great. It's interesting, just the different sort of creative uses that you've got to this, and I think just again being self-employed, you're constantly sort of looking for these opportunities, which obviously you have done and managed to make a success of it that way. So, I mean, in terms of what you've achieved so far, what would you say was the thing that you're most proud of?
I think probably as a bigger picture, this NGI contract that I'm working on at the moment, because I think I'm getting into so many beautiful spaces. I'm going to, so I did the Rising, for example, at Raby Castle.
Yeah.
Like I said, Bowes Museum, Durham Cathedral, various beautiful buildings and structures so I worked at Hawksley Nature Reserve, because it was the inclusion and accessibility thing. It's a nature reserve, so you have to show whether it's accessible around there, paths outside and that kind of stuff. Worked there, and it's just lovely. You go in and you do your little bit of work and you have a coffee and you chat to the staff. So all of these different individual projects, 30 of them, I'm about 20 through the 30 now. And yeah, it's great. So I'm just so proud. I'm so pleased, and I feel blessed again that I got the opportunity to do that, and that potentially. So one of the projects that's coming up is Dalton Park Shopping Centre.
Right.
So imagine that I've got the main walkthrough of Dalton Park. I don't know if people are familiar with it, and it's got kind of sails over the top.
Yeah.
So I'll create a digital version of that and then put markers onto all of the stores so people can realise where all of the shops are in Dalton Park. But then we'll have the potential opportunity for future business to speak to all of the stores to create digital versions of accessibility inclusion aids for their particular stores. So we've got, I think, 84. So that would keep me going for a long time.
Keep you busy.
I'm quite happy to. I've already discussed potentially giving them a discount on the store bit. But then you've got this walkthrough of Dalton Park, and then you can click onto the door of the store and you can walk directly into the store as well. So it becomes a big useful thing. For them. And
absolutely. And any sort of downside or sort of period from when you first started that you've thought, not happy with this? Any real negatives? Nothing at all.
Absolutely nothing.
I think that's brilliant.
I think
to be able to say that.
I reevaluated life.
Yeah.
I didn't have that big salary, but I did have, let's say, financial security. But I'm just in a situation now where money isn't as important as it was.
No, which is a nice place for anyone to be, isn't it?
Yeah.
That's it. And so, what's the future look like for you?
I'm thinking 4 years and then retirement, but I don't know whether I'll stop doing it. I think I'll still,
I think it goes back to what we were saying earlier, isn't it? It's like sort of clearly you can see a passion for what you're doing.
Yeah.
You're doing things that I think give you a sense of purpose.
Yeah.
And it works really, really well in that respect.
I've grown. I mean, because of networking, I've grown into a place where I enjoy every day, and it might be doing this.
Yeah.
Mel, who owns this office, or works in this office, she's great. I've known her for a long time. I consider her a friend. I have a lot of networking friends.
Yeah.
I feel like I have a lot of client friends, who I would definitely go for a beer with most of them. Not all of them, most of them. Yeah, and there's nothing negative about what I'm doing. I do occasionally get that kind of imposter syndrome, as everybody does.
Yeah.
Because I know that the stuff that I'm doing could potentially be copied. It's, other people are doing it around the country in various different ways. But that doesn't worry me, because if I was 20, it might worry me a lot. With the 40 years to work, but I haven't got 40 years to work.
No.
So artificial intelligence doesn't bother me, because if it comes, it comes. I'll just stop working.
That's it. I'm comfortable.
Yeah.
And you've got a life that you've enjoyed, a life that you are enjoying.
Yeah.
And
I think the question that I often ask myself, if I died tomorrow, how would I look back? And I'd look back about having this long career that I've worked hard at and started not to enjoy, but then I've had 5 years of, cloud nine happiness.
Yeah.
Relatively, and that's the whole concept of me stopping working in that, treadmill job was to get those 5 years. And if it becomes 6 years, if it becomes 20 years, if it becomes 30 years, all the better.
Yeah.
But every day,
it's living life.
Yeah.
It's living, and I mean, and what a great way to round up the podcast. Someone that's realised a dream, made it come true, and is just living life. Owen, it's been an absolute pleasure. Thank you very much.